Some towns don't forget what happened. They just stop talking about it. In these places, the streets look normal. People smile, shops open, life goes on. But ask the wrong question, and the conversation ends. Because in some small towns, everyone knows something. They know who pulled the trigger. They know what was seen that night. They know what never made it into the police report. And yet, no one speaks. Not out of ignorance, out of fear, out of loyalty, out of shame. Witnesses stayed silent. Evidence disappeared. Stories were buried along with the truth. These are not legends. These are real American towns with real crimes and secrets so heavy the people who live there still refuse to say a word. Tonight, we're going to places where the mystery isn't what happened. It's why no one will admit they know the answer. Skidmore is a farming town so small that everyone knows everyone else's routine. In the early 1980s, its population barely crosses 400. There is one main street, a handful of businesses, and a shared understanding that certain names carry weight. One name, above all others, carries fear. Ken Rex McElroy. McElroy isn't a legend or a rumor passed around later. He exists in court records, police reports, signed affidavits. For more than 20 years, he is accused of theft, arson, livestock rustling, assault, child abuse, and intimidation. The list grows longer with time, not shorter. Yet every case collapses. Witnesses suddenly recant, statements are withdrawn, evidence goes missing, charges fall apart before they reach a jury. Locals explain it simply. If you testify against Ken Rex McElroy, you pay for it. McElroy doesn't hide his threats. He parks outside homes for hours with a rifle visible in the cab of his truck. He follows witnesses down the street. He corners people in public places and reminds them what happens to those who talk. Law enforcement arrests him again and again. And again, he walks free. By the time 1981 arrives, fear in Skidmore isn't whispered anymore. It's routine. Parents warn their children who to avoid. Neighbors stop making eye contact. Silence becomes survival. And everyone knows something is going to break. On July 10, 1981, Ken Rex McElroy pulls into downtown Skidmore with his wife, Trina. He is armed. No one disputes that. He walks into the D&G Tavern, a place filled with people who know him well and fear him deeply. Inside the bar are dozens of locals. Some have testified against him in the past. Some were threatened into silence. Some have simply lived in his shadow for years. An argument breaks out. McElroy leaves the bar and sits in his pickup truck, parked on the main street. It's midday, broad daylight. Families are nearby. Cars pass slowly. Nothing about the scene is hidden. Then the sound cuts through the town. One gunshot. Then another. McElroy slumps forward in the driver's seat, dead. At least 40 people are present. Some are standing just feet away. There are no masks, no chaos, no confusion about what happened. And yet, when investigators begin asking questions, something impossible occurs. No one saw the shooter. Not a single witness, not one clear description, not one name offered. To outsiders, the question feels absurd. How can 40 people watch a man die and see nothing? But in Skidmore, that question isn't asked out loud. Because the mystery was never about who pulled the trigger. It was about what happens when fear lasts too long and a town decides, without meetings or agreements, that the truth will never leave. Skidmore kept its silence. And it wasn't the last small town in America to do so. Nearly 70 years earlier, in a quiet town across the Midwest, an entire family would be slaughtered in their sleep. No arrests, no solved case, no one willing to speak freely. A town forced to live with fear, secrecy, and unanswered questions. Villisca, Iowa, June 1912. And inside one house, that silence still echoes today. Villisca is the kind of small Midwestern town where everyone knows everyone else. In the early 1900s, life moves at the rhythm of the railroad and the seasons. But in June 1912, that rhythm is shattered. On the night of June 9th, the Moore family, Josiah and Sarah Moore, and their 4 children attend a church program with 2 visiting girls, sisters Lena and Ina Stillinger. They return home, exhausted but happy, unaware that something unspeakable waits for them. Someone enters their home, quietly, with precision. The family sleeps. The intruder moves through rooms. An axe taken from inside the house becomes the instrument of slaughter. One by one, all 8 occupants are killed while sleeping. Their faces are covered. Objects are positioned around the rooms. Mirrors reflect a scene of unnatural calm. By dawn, neighbors notice something is wrong. When they enter the home, they are confronted by a scene no one could imagine. Horror is compounded by confusion. The crime scene is compromised almost immediately as curious townspeople touch evidence, move items, and open doors. Investigators suspect the killer was familiar with the house. No signs of forced entry, no apparent struggle, no screams, just death. Panic spreads. Villisca, a town where doors were always unlocked, suddenly locks every door and window. Residents whisper, avoid the streets, and speak in hushed tones. Newspapers cover the case nationwide. The story is both sensational and terrifying, a family wiped out without warning, and no one knowing how or why. Rumors circulate about suspects, a traveling preacher, a local farmer, even children. Some confessions arise, then vanish. Some suspects die before trial. No one is convicted. The murder remains officially unsolved. And yet Villisca lives on, haunted by the memory of that night. The years pass. The Moore house remains. Tourists visit. Paranormal investigators record cold spots, strange noises, and lights that flicker without source. Skeptics suggest coincidence or exaggeration. Believers insist the house holds residual energy, the echo of violent acts frozen in time. But perhaps the most chilling part is not the murders themselves, it's the silence that follows. Locals refuse interviews. They avoid the house at night. They warn outsiders not to linger. Questions are answered with deflection or quick exit. For decades, the town itself becomes a participant in the story, guarding secrets that outsiders can never fully access. Even as investigators, historians, and ghost hunters return repeatedly, Villisca keeps some of its truth hidden. Some rooms are avoided entirely. Some phenomena defy logical explanation. Visitors leave unsettled. Residents shrug and say nothing. Yet the pattern is familiar. Fear and secrecy, decades apart, shape the town's identity. Skidmore did it in 1981. Villisca did it in 1912. And history suggests it can happen again. Because not all places that hold secrets are the ones you expect. Far from Iowa's cornfields, in the desert high above the Verde Valley in Arizona, sits a grand hotel that once functioned as a hospital. Patients died here, sometimes mysteriously, sometimes painfully. Reports of shadows, footsteps, and unexplained activity begin to surface decades after its closure. Locals rarely speak of it openly. A town that survived mining booms and busts now carries a different kind of silence, one born not of fear of a criminal, not of violence against a family, but of what the living cannot explain. Jerome, Arizona, the Jerome Grand Hotel, 1930s and beyond. And in that building, decades later, secrets remain.
Jerome clings to the side of Cleopatra Hill, overlooking the Verde Valley. Once a booming copper mining town, Jerome thrived in the early 20th century, but suffered deadly accidents, disease, and economic collapse. To care for the sick and injured, the town converted a hospital building that would later become the Jerome Grand Hotel. From the 1920s through the 1950s, hundreds of patients passed through its doors. Miners with injuries, tuberculosis victims, and others with illnesses or accidents. Many die within its walls. Records confirm deaths, but some patients simply vanish, leaving corridors and rooms frozen in uncertainty. Locals whisper about gurneys rolling on their own, lights flickering, and doors closing without hands nearby. When the hospital closes, the building is abandoned for decades. But Jerome has a long memory. Residents recall staff and patients who never quite left. Those who stayed report strange occurrences, shadows moving where no one is, lights switching on midnight, and footsteps echoing through empty hallways. Some claim to hear laughter or coughing in rooms that have been empty for years. Paranormal investigators arrive. They report sudden temperature drops, electrical interference, and unexplained recordings of voices. Skeptics argue it's old wiring or the brain filling in gaps. Believers insist the hotel holds residual energy from decades of pain and death. The phenomena repeat across decades. Visitors consistently report activity in the same rooms, the third floor, near the old maternity ward, and around the elevator shaft. The line between history and haunting blurs here. Jerome survived economic collapse, disease, and mining disasters, yet the building keeps its own timeline. Whatever lingers inside refuses to leave, and locals learn quickly. Some stories are safer left untold. Guests and staff describe experiences that cannot be easily explained. Objects move, shadows appear, and whispers are heard in rooms where no one should be. One recurring story involves a maintenance worker who tragically falls down the old elevator shaft. Later, visitors claim to see a figure in work clothes standing silently near the shaft, then vanishing. Others report sudden chills or disembodied footsteps in the corridors. Despite decades of attention, the building holds tight to its secrets. Skeptics note that fear can create perception. Believers point to decades of consistent independent reports. Both agree on one thing: the Jerome Grand Hotel is a place where the past never fully left. And yet, perhaps the most haunting element isn't what happens inside the building, it's the town's reaction. Locals refuse to discuss certain rooms, certain floors. Some warn visitors to leave quickly. Others walk past the hotel with their heads down. They know, as generations before them have learned, that some truths are too heavy to speak aloud.
3 towns, 3 secrets. A man killed in front of 40 witnesses. A family murdered with no killer named. A hotel where the dead may never have left. What connects them isn't just mystery, it's silence. If you're from Skidmore, Villisca, or Jerome, you've heard stories outsiders never will. Things that don't make it into police files. Details people stop sharing once they grow up. If you know something or grew up hearing whispers about these places, leave a comment. Some truths only survive when locals speak. Subscribe to WhisprFrame for documented small-town mysteries, unsolved cases, and places where the truth is buried deeper than the evidence. Because some towns don't forget what happened. They just make sure no one talks about it.